What if the thing you've been calling being careful is actually just fear wearing a mask? You don't realize it at first. It starts small. A late night thought, a what if, a quiet tension in your chest as you replay a conversation you haven't even had yet. You tell yourself you're just being responsible, preparing, thinking ahead, staying sharp. But days pass, then weeks, and that sharpness starts to dull into heaviness. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling, running mental simulations like it's your second job. You imagine the worst-case scenario, then try to plan your way out of it. You call it wisdom, you call it caution, but underneath all that noise, it's just fear whispering that maybe something will go wrong, and if you worry hard enough, you'll be ready. But the preparation never feels like peace. And you start noticing something. The more you try to control every outcome in your head, the less control you feel in your body. You're constantly wired, exhausted, distracted. Your mind is always somewhere else, solving problems that don't exist, fighting battles that haven't begun, losing hours of your life to moments that never even happened. And yet you keep calling it responsibility. But what if responsibility isn't about anticipating disaster? What if it's about showing up fully to what's real? It's strange how worry sneaks in quietly, almost politely disguised as something noble. It doesn't crash through the door like panic. It doesn't scream like fear. It walks in wearing a name tag that says responsibility. You tell yourself, I'm just being careful. I'm planning ahead. I'm protecting myself. And it feels reasonable, admirable even. You think you're being smart, cautious, prepared. But beneath the surface, worry is something entirely different. It's not maturity, it's not foresight, it's fear cleverly disguised, rehearsing worst-case scenarios like a method actor addicted to the role. Worry is fear that learned how to sound like logic. It wraps itself in adult-sounding language. I just need to be ready. I want to avoid mistakes. I don't want to be blindsided. But readiness born from fear is never true readiness. It's hypervigilance. It's anxiety in a tailored suit. It convinces you that if you worry long enough, if you obsess hard enough, if you analyze every angle with enough intensity, you'll somehow stop the bad thing from happening. But you won't, because worry isn't a shield, it's a loop, a mental spiral that gives you something to do while making sure you never actually feel safe. And that's the trap. It feels productive. It mimics action. It gives your brain something to chew on, some illusion of control to hold. But it doesn't move you forward, it holds you in place. You walk in circles mentally while your body tightens, your breath shortens, your world shrinks. All in the name of being prepared. But ask yourself, when has worry ever actually protected you? When has it ever stopped the thing from happening? And more importantly, how often did the thing you feared never even come? The truth is, we've been trained to see worry as virtue. In a culture that worships overachievement and equates productivity with worth, anxiety becomes a badge of honor. If you're not worrying, are you even trying? If you're not stressing about the future, are you even taking life seriously? But this mindset is broken. It teaches us to equate constant mental tension with responsibility. To believe that the more mentally burdened we are, the more prepared we must be. And yet it's not true. Carrying fear like a full-time job doesn't make you wise, it makes you tired. Worry doesn't make you more capable, it makes you more cautious, more doubtful, more distracted. It clouds your ability to think clearly, to act decisively, to respond to real life instead of imaginary threats. It convinces you that safety can be found through overthinking. But safety isn't found in anticipating every disaster, it's found in your ability to stay grounded when one arrives. And ironically, the more you let go of the illusion that worry is helping, the more you begin to see clearly. You see that responsibility isn't about predicting everything, it's about showing up fully for what's actually here. So next time your mind starts spinning, ask yourself this: is this responsibility? Or is this fear dressed up as something noble? Because once you see the mask, you start to recognize that the enemy isn't the unknown. It's the way fear convinces you that you need to suffer in advance just to stay safe. Worry doesn't just visit your mind, it takes up residence in your nervous system. It doesn't just ask for your attention, it demands your energy. At first, it feels like a mental exercise, a way of being prepared. But what starts as a few anxious thoughts quietly evolves into a full-body experience. You find yourself constantly bracing for impact even when nothing's actually happening. Your shoulders stay tense, Your jaw clenches. You forget to breathe deeply. You don't even realize how long you've been living like that, tight, cautious, guarded. And by the time you do, you're already exhausted. But not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that seeps into your spirit. That's the hidden cost of worry. It doesn't solve anything, it just drains you. It's a constant rehearsal for disaster, a mental treadmill where you're running but going nowhere. Every imagined problem pulls a little more from your reserves. Every internal conversation you play out, every scenario you script in your head, every defense you construct for a threat that hasn't arrived, takes something from you. You think you're preparing. You think you're staying safe. But really, you're spending tomorrow's strength on today's illusions. And here's the part most people don't realize. While worry pretends to be a plan, it robs you of the very thing that makes you powerful, your presence. Because presence is what allows you to meet life as it is. It's the clarity that comes when your mind is no longer spinning in fear, but grounded in now. It's the quiet strength of someone who isn't preoccupied with everything that might go wrong, but is fully available to what's actually happening. Presence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're not controlled by fear. It means your nervous system is no longer stuck in a constant state of preparation. It means your energy isn't scattered across 1,000 invisible what-ifs. It's here, with you, ready to respond, not react. When you're present, you breathe differently. You speak differently. You listen more closely. You choose more intentionally. You're not racing to solve a problem that doesn't exist yet. You're showing up with all of you exactly where you are. That's not passivity. That's power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need panic to feel engaged. The kind that isn't rushed or flustered by uncertainty. And maybe that's the shift we've been missing. Not from chaos to calm, but from disconnection to presence. Because life isn't asking you to predict the future. It's asking you to show up for the moment you're in. And that moment doesn't need your worry, it needs your awareness, your breath, your attention, your heart. So when worry starts whispering again, asking for your energy, pause. And ask yourself, do I really want to give my strength to something that isn't even real yet? Or do I want to reclaim it right here, right now? Because the most powerful thing you can bring into any moment is all of you. Isn't it wild how much time we spend trying to solve problems that never arrive? Entire afternoons lost inside conversations that only ever happen in your head. Whole nights sacrificed to imaginary confrontations. You rehearse what you'll say if they're upset. You prepare your reaction for news that hasn't been delivered. You map out every detail of a failure that hasn't occurred and probably never will. Your body tightens as if danger is real, but the room is still. No one's knocking. Nothing's on fire. Yet your heart races like it's preparing for war, all in response to a thought, not a threat. And what's even more surprising, almost painful to admit, is that if you look back on all those scenarios, you worried yourself sick over most of them, never happened. That job you thought you'd lose, you kept it. That friendship you thought had ended, it was fine. That worst-case scenario that haunted your mornings and wrecked your sleep, it never showed up. The emergency didn't call. The fallout didn't come. The silence didn't mean rejection. The delay didn't mean doom. You carried a storm inside you for days, for weeks, and the skies stayed clear. But even in the rare moments when the thing you feared did happen, something else happened too. You showed up. You handled it. Not because you worried enough in advance, but because when the time came, you rose. Not perfectly, not without stress, but with resilience, with presence, with whatever strength the moment required. And that's the part we forget when we're caught in the spiral, that even when life is hard, we're more capable than we think. Our fear forgets that we've survived before. Because the truth is, you've handled every hard thing you didn't think you could handle. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every sharp turn you never saw coming, you met it. Maybe shakily, maybe slowly, but you met it. And worry didn't get you there. Presence did. You got through because you were there, not 3 steps ahead in your mind, not spiraling in analysis, but rooted in the now, forced into action, stripped of what-if thinking. Because real life was already happening. So why do we keep forgetting that? Why do we keep giving our peace away to futures we may never live? Maybe because worry feels safer than uncertainty. It feels like doing something even if it changes nothing. But that's the illusion. Worry doesn't stop pain, it just extends it before it arrives. It makes you suffer twice. Once in imagination, once in reality, and sometimes only in imagination. The next time your mind starts building disaster scenarios, pause. Ask yourself, has this fear earned my energy? Has it proven itself useful or just familiar? Remind yourself of the quiet truth you've lived again and again. If it happens, I'll face it. And if it doesn't, I won't waste my life preparing for a ghost. You've handled more than you remember, and you'll handle more than you think. There's this quiet fear that lives beneath all our worrying, the fear that if we stop, everything will fall apart. That if we don't keep running mental simulations, if we're not constantly scanning for what could go wrong, something will slip through the cracks. We mistake worry for vigilance. We confuse fear with foresight. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that if we aren't emotionally bracing for impact, we're being reckless. That if we're not mentally tense, we're somehow unprepared. But here's the truth. Letting go of worry isn't the same as letting go of responsibility. It's not carelessness, it's clarity. Worry scatters your energy. It spreads your focus thin across countless futures, most of which will never arrive. You're constantly half present, your attention split between the now and 100 imagined outcomes. And in that fractured state, it's hard to move with intention, hard to make clear decisions, hard to trust yourself. You hesitate more, you second guess, you freeze. Not because you don't care, but because you've convinced yourself that anxiety is part of the process. But when you begin to release that belief, something powerful happens. You stop reacting from fear, and you start acting from stillness. People think that a calm person is a passive one. But that's only because they've never seen what real presence looks like. Presence isn't passive, it's potent. It's the kind of awareness that moves with precision instead of panic. The kind of strength that doesn't have to yell to be heard. When you stop feeding the noise of worry, your mind becomes quieter. And in that quiet, you start hearing something else, your own discernment, your own knowing. Not the voice of fear that tries to predict everything, but the voice of truth that knows how to respond to what's real. And that's the difference. Worry lives in the future. Presence lives in the now. Worry tries to anticipate. Presence meets the moment. One makes you spiral. The other makes you steady. And when you're steady, you don't need to over-explain, over-prepare, or overreact. You move slower, but you move sharper. You say less, but what you say carries weight. You stop trying to control every variable because you've become the kind of person who doesn't need to. Not out of arrogance, but because your groundedness has become your authority. Letting go of worry doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you start caring more wisely. You stop wasting energy on invisible futures and start investing it into the life right in front of you. And that shift, subtle but profound, is what makes you powerful. Not because you know what will happen, but because you're no longer afraid of not knowing. So the next time your mind tells you that you're being irresponsible for choosing peace, remember, this peace is not the absence of awareness. It's the presence of strength. And strength doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from learning how to meet it fully and calmly when it arrives. Worry has a strange way of making itself feel necessary. It doesn't come crashing in like terror or panic. It slips in quietly pretending to be helpful. It wraps itself in the language of survival. Your brain tells you it's scanning for danger, that it's being responsible, that it's protecting you from the worst-case scenario. But what it's really doing is running on a faulty survival algorithm, one that mistakes overthinking for safety and fear for preparation. At its core, worry is your brain trying to feel useful when it's scared. It wants to help. It wants to stay ahead of pain. So it rehearses disasters that haven't happened, searching for ways to outmaneuver life's unknowns. It loops through imaginary conversations, mental arguments, potential breakdowns, convinced that if it can simulate enough suffering in advance, it can prevent it from happening later. But this isn't strength. This isn't strategy. It's your nervous system stuck in the past, overcompensating for wounds it couldn't predict the first time. And the irony, worry doesn't stop bad things from happening. It just forces you to live through them twice. Once in your imagination and then again, maybe in real life. It offers the illusion of control but delivers only exhaustion. Your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one, so it tenses. It contracts. It prepares to run or fight even when there's nothing in front of you but a thought. And over time, that false alarm becomes your baseline. You live in a heightened state of alert, not because danger is real, but because your brain is convinced it might be. That's the trap. Worry convinces you that by anticipating everything that could go wrong, you're making yourself stronger. But strength doesn't come from constant anticipation, it comes from presence. From knowing how to respond when the moment actually arrives. From trusting that you don't need to live in a permanent state of readiness to be okay. Most people don't realize this, but worry is a coping mechanism that got stuck. Maybe there was a time it felt useful. Maybe as a child it was the only way you knew how to stay emotionally safe by staying ahead of the chaos. But now it's not saving you. It's draining you. It's keeping you out of the moment. It's keeping you from your body, your breath, your relationships, your peace. You don't need to keep rehearsing suffering to protect yourself. What you need is to unlearn the reflex that tells you worry is love. That worry is caution. That worry is care. It's not. Worry is just the mind's way of trying to outrun vulnerability. But vulnerability is not weakness. It's the gateway to real power. Because when you stop letting your life be dictated by a malfunctioning survival instinct, you begin to live from something deeper, something stronger than fear trust. The most tragic part of worry isn't just what it does to your mind, it's what it steals from your life. While you're busy forecasting storms that haven't arrived, life is unfolding in real time. And you're missing it. You're physically in the room, but not really there. Your eyes are open, but your attention is hijacked by imagined outcomes. You're talking to someone, but half your brain is 3 moves ahead in a mental chess game that no one else is playing. Worry doesn't just drain your energy, it dims your vision. It makes you blind to beauty, deaf to presence, numb to peace. You could be watching a sunset, but instead you're reviewing that one sentence you said 2 hours ago. You could be laughing with someone you love, but your nervous system is still tangled in a problem you haven't even been asked to solve. You miss the way someone looked at you with kindness. You miss the moment your body told you it was tired. You miss the joy that was trying to land in your heart but couldn't find space. Why? Because worry had already taken up all the room. And the worst part, you convince yourself it's necessary. You think your worry is a form of engagement. You think that by overthinking you're showing up for your life. But in reality, you're standing on the sidelines watching your life through a foggy window of fear. You're not living, you're monitoring. You're not experiencing, you're analyzing. And what slips away in the process isn't just time, it's meaning, connection, wholeness, presence. Worry robs you of clarity by scattering your attention across 1,000 invisible threats. It makes everything feel urgent, everything feel personal, everything feel like a potential danger. You become reactive instead of responsive. You interpret silence as rejection, delay as failure, one unread message as proof that something's wrong. And suddenly your entire sense of reality is shaped not by what is, but by what might be. But here's the truth, the more you feed worry, the less you're able to recognize what's real. The mind becomes addicted to the familiar hum of anxiety, always looking for the next thing to fix, the next threat to neutralize. But life isn't meant to be neutralized, it's meant to be lived, felt, met fully. And you can't meet life if you're mentally 5 steps ahead of it all the time. You can't hold joy if both hands are gripping fear. So what if you just stopped, not forever, just long enough to notice what's already here? What if you looked around and saw not what's missing, but what's enough? What if you stopped interpreting every quiet moment as something to be solved and instead allowed it to be sacred? Because the life you're worried about losing is the very life that's trying to happen through you right now. But you have to look up. You have to come back. You have to see it. Otherwise, worry will keep you so busy trying to protect a future that you forget to live the present. And that more than anything is the real cost. It only takes one question to shift the entire weight of your mind. One small, almost defiant question whispered beneath the noise. What if I'll be okay? Even if it goes wrong, most people don't realize it. But worry is a question machine. It runs constant loops in the background whispering, what if I fail? What if they leave? What if it all falls apart? What if I'm not enough? And over time, those questions don't just echo in your mind, they shape your nervous system. Your breath shortens, your muscles tense. You start living like a threat is always right around the corner. Your body prepares for disaster even when all you're doing is sitting in traffic or waiting for someone to text back. But here's the thing. Your brain is not trying to hurt you, it's trying to protect you. It learned somewhere, maybe long ago, that if it could anticipate pain, it might prevent it. If it could mentally prepare for loss, it might soften the blow. But that survival mechanism, while once useful, has become a prison. Because the more you try to predict pain, the less present you are for peace. That's where reframing begins, not by pretending everything is fine, but by gently offering your brain a new story, a new path, a new question. What if I'll be okay? Even if this doesn't go the way I hope, you're not lying to yourself. You're just daring to believe that resilience might be stronger than control. That even if the relationship ends, the job falls through the plan, fails, you will not. Because here's what fear forgets you've made it through before. Through heartbreaks that felt like the end, through uncertainty that made you question everything, through grief and shame and hard decisions you didn't think you could make, but you did. You've survived versions of worst-case scenario already, and you're still here. Maybe not untouched, but intact, wiser, more awake. Reframing isn't toxic positivity. It's not slapping a smile on a storm. It's a quiet rebellion against fear's monopoly on your mind. It's choosing to believe in your capacity to respond instead of collapse, to adapt instead of control. It's realizing that your safety doesn't come from perfect conditions. It comes from the relationship you have with yourself when conditions fall apart. So next time your thoughts spiral with endless what-ifs, try just one more. What if I'll be okay anyway? What if strength doesn't mean knowing what's ahead, but trusting who you'll be when you get there? Because that question, that subtle shift, it doesn't just change your mind, it changes your body, your breath deepens, your shoulders drop, your chest softens. And for a moment, maybe for the first time in a long time, you feel what worry could never offer you: peace without needing proof. Fear has a fast trigger. It rushes and demands urgency and convinces you that every moment is a moment to defend yourself, that silence must be filled, that discomfort must be solved, that any uncertainty is a threat. It pulls you into reaction before you've even had a chance to breathe. And most of us don't realize how often we're living like that, on edge, on alert, always reacting. Not because there's danger, but because our nervous system has been trained to expect it. When you live in reaction, life becomes a series of fire drills. Every message feels urgent. Every look feels loaded. Every delay feels like rejection. You start interpreting everything through the lens of fear. A missed call becomes a crisis. A pause in conversation feels like abandonment. A small mistake spirals into shame. And without even noticing, you're no longer responding to what's real, you're reacting to what you're afraid it might mean. But peace is different. Peace is slower. It doesn't panic. It pauses. It listens before it speaks. It doesn't assume the worst, it remains open to possibility. When you act from peace, you don't lose your boundaries, you strengthen them. You don't become passive, you become intentional. Your words carry more weight because they're not laced with anxiety. Your presence becomes more powerful because it's no longer broadcasting fear. There's a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally porous. When you react from fear, you absorb everything. Every mood, every silence, every shift in energy, your system takes it in and starts building defense. But when you act from peace, you don't absorb, you observe. You notice without collapsing. You witness without over-personalizing. You respond without over-explaining. And suddenly everything changes, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You don't need to defend yourself in every interaction. You don't need to rush to clarify, to justify, to fix. That urgency is not your intuition, it's your survival mode. And when you learn to recognize that, you create a powerful pause, a moment between stimulus and response, a breath that resets the room. That's where true emotional intelligence lives, not in always knowing the right answer, but in having the stillness to wait for it. Not in controlling what others feel or think, but in owning the energy you bring into the room. That's the power of acting from peace. You no longer rely on performance or pleasing or proving. You simply are. Grounded, aware, present, and people feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they respond to it. Your calm becomes contagious. Your steadiness becomes safety. Conversations soften. Arguments de-escalate. Decisions become cleaner. Even your mistakes land differently because you're no longer interpreting them as proof that everything's falling apart. You're just in life, not running from it, not defending against it, just in it. So the next time fear tries to grab the wheel and steer your reaction, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this response coming from fear or from peace? Because when you choose peace, not only do you change the moment, you change the atmosphere. And in a world that runs on noise, your stillness becomes a kind of quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself because it already knows who it is. Here's what most of us never get taught. Peace is not something that arrives after everything in your life is perfectly in place. It's something you practice while things are still messy, unfinished, unresolved. The real work isn't learning how to predict the future. It's learning how to meet the present with your full attention. That's the lesson woven through all of this worry. Might feel like protection, but it's really just prolonged fear that wears the mask of responsibility. The next time you catch your mind spiraling, playing out worst-case scenarios, bracing for conversations that haven't happened, tightening around things you can't control, pause, ask yourself a different question. What if I'll be okay anyway? Not because everything goes right, but because you trust yourself to meet whatever comes. That's the foundation of real confidence, not the ability to control life, but the ability to stay present through it. You don't have to overplan every outcome to be strong. You don't have to suffer in advance to stay safe. What you need is to come back to your breath, your body, your awareness, again and again. Because peace isn't passive. It's a powerful choice, one that will quietly transform how you move through the world and how the world responds to you.